Ethan had always been curious about the stars. Even as a small boy on Earth, he would stare at the night sky for hours, wondering what life might exist on distant planets. Now, at 14, he was on a research mission with a small human crew on an alien world called Zyphera, a planet that glowed faintly with bioluminescent plants and towering crystal trees. The landscape shimmered in soft greens and purples, casting unusual shadows across the ground. It was beautiful, but also full of unknown dangers. Ethan wandered slightly away from the main research camp. The adults were occupied scanning for new minerals and documenting alien plant life. But Ethan wanted more than science. He wanted adventure. He wanted to see the world of Zyphera, as no human had seen before. He wandered through a forest of glowing trees, the soft hum of alien insects filling the air. Suddenly, he heard a faint sound, a soft cry. At first, he thought it was just the wind through the crystal leaves, but then the sound grew louder, almost like someone calling for help. Following the sound, Ethan pushed aside thick vines that glowed like neon lights. That was when he saw her. A young alien girl was trapped under a fallen branch. She was small, maybe a year or two younger than Ethan, with skin that shimmered like silver under Zyphera's twin suns. Her large, dark eyes were wide with fear. Her legs were pinned beneath the branch, and a thin trail of blood ran down her arm. Ethan's heart raced. He had never seen an alien up close before, and seeing her in pain made him feel both afraid and determined. He knew he had to help. "Don't worry," he said in a calm voice, though he wasn't sure if she could understand him. "I'm here to help." The girl stared at him, trembling. She made soft, high-pitched noises. Ethan didn't understand them, but he sensed her fear. He knelt beside her and examined the branch. It was heavy, far heavier than it looked, but Ethan had grown up climbing trees and moving heavy objects on Earth. He could do this. Taking a deep breath, he braced his legs and lifted. The branch shifted slightly, and the girl gasped. She tried to move, but the branch pinched her arm again. Ethan gritted his teeth and lifted harder. Finally, with one last push, the branch rolled off to the side, freeing her. The girl fell back on the ground, catching her breath. Ethan quickly helped her sit up. "Are you okay?" he asked. She pointed to her arm, where blood still flowed. Ethan tore a strip from his shirt and gently tied it around her arm as a makeshift bandage. The girl's eyes widened, a hint of understanding crossing her face. She reached out and touched his hand, as if saying thank you. At that moment, they both heard the sound of footsteps, or, more accurately, alien claws rushing toward them. Ethan looked up and saw several wild creatures running through the glowing forest. Their bodies were long and thin, covered in spiky scales, with glowing red eyes. They snarled and hissed, moving like shadows across the plants. Ethan realized the girl was in more danger than just her injury. "We need to move, now!" he shouted. The girl struggled to stand, but Ethan helped her. Together, they ran through the forest, dodging branches and glowing vines. Ethan could feel the creatures closing in, their claws scraping the ground. He had never run so fast in his life. Then, just as it seemed the creatures would catch them, the girl suddenly grabbed his hand and pointed. Ahead, the forest opened into a small clearing. In the middle stood a group of aliens larger than the girl, wearing simple clothing made from plant fibers. Their eyes glowing softly in the dim light. They raised weapons, not in anger but in caution, their attention fixed on the approaching predators. The creatures skidded to a halt at the edge of the clearing. They hissed but didn't enter further. One of the aliens stepped forward, holding a staff that emitted a faint light. The creatures hesitated, then slowly retreated into the forest. Ethan breathed heavily. "That was close," he said, trying to sound brave. Though his heart was still racing, the alien girl leaned against him, exhausted but safe. The other aliens quickly surrounded them, speaking rapidly in their own language. Ethan didn't understand a word, but he could see the concern in their eyes. They gestured toward the girl, and then at Ethan, questioning him. Ethan held up his hands. I saved her," he said slowly. She was hurt. One of the aliens, taller and more commanding than the rest, stepped forward. He had silver skin like the girl, but his eyes were sharp and wise. He studied Ethan carefully, tilting his head. Then he spoke, and though the words were unfamiliar, his tone was clear. He wanted to know if Ethan meant harm. Ethan shook his head. No, I only wanted to help her. The alien chief seemed to consider this. He turned to the girl, who looked back at Ethan with wide eyes. Then he gestured for her to speak. She made soft sounds, pointing at Ethan, and then at her arm. Ethan understood. She was explaining what had happened, telling the chief that he had saved her life. For a long moment, the chief said nothing. Ethan held his breath. He had no idea what the aliens would do. But then, slowly, the chief lowered his staff and nodded. Ethan felt a wave of relief. The chief wasn't angry. He seemed impressed. The aliens led them to a small village hidden within the forest. Houses were built from glowing plant materials, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of alien flowers. The villagers moved quickly to help the girl, using strange tools that Ethan had never seen before. Within minutes, her wounds were cleaned and wrapped in glowing bandages that seemed to speed healing. Ethan watched, fascinated. The girl's pain seemed to lessen almost immediately. She looked up at him and smiled faintly. He smiled back. Somehow, they had formed a silent bond. Two beings from completely different worlds, connected by courage and compassion. Word of Ethan's bravery spread quickly through the village. Children whispered about the human who had lifted the heavy branch and saved the girl. Some adults looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and awe. Humans were rare on Zyphora. Most villagers had only heard stories passed down for generations, stories of strong, fearless humans who traveled the stars. But seeing one in person, risking his life for an alien child, was something entirely new. The alien chief, meanwhile, watched silently. He had seen many brave warriors in his life, but there was something different about Ethan. He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't shout orders. He acted out of instinct and care. That was unusual. As night fell over the glowing forest, Ethan sat beside the girl, now resting comfortably in a small hammock-like structure. He tried to speak to her, using simple words and gestures. She responded with nods, hand signs, and small noises. It was not much, but it was enough for them to understand each other. Ethan realized something important. Courage wasn't just about fighting or strength. It was about caring for others, even when you were scared. And sometimes, even small acts could change the way people or aliens saw the world. That night, as the twin moons of Zyphora rose in the sky, Ethan lay on a soft bed made of glowing leaves. He couldn't stop thinking about the girl, the chief, and the strange, beautiful world around him. He had wanted adventure, and now he had found it, but he also understood that adventure came with responsibility. He didn't know what would happen tomorrow. Would the chief trust him more? Would the villagers accept him fully? Or would there be new challenges he couldn't imagine? One thing was certain. Ethan had made a difference. He had saved a life. And on this distant planet, that was something worth more than any treasure or discovery. Outside, the forest whispered in the night. Strange creatures scuttled and called to each other. But Ethan felt safe. He had done what he had to do, and for the first time, he understood that being human, brave, compassionate, and willing to act was something that could shine even among the stars. And somewhere deep in the village, the alien chief's eyes gleamed as he watched Ethan. The boy was young, small, and unarmed, but he had a courage that few could match. That was unforgettable. Little did Ethan know, this was only the beginning. His actions today would ripple through the village, through the planet, and perhaps even further. He had stepped onto Zyphora as a visitor, but he would soon leave a mark that no alien could forget. The night was quiet now. But tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new chances for Ethan to prove the courage and heart that made humans remarkable. The next morning, the alien village of Zyphora woke under a sky painted in soft shades of violet and gold. Ethan had slept under a canopy of glowing leaves, surrounded by the gentle hum of the forest. He awoke to find the young alien girl, Lyra, already sitting nearby. Her silver skin reflecting the morning light, she watched him carefully, tilting her head as if considering whether he could be trusted. Ethan smiled gently. "Good morning," he said, unsure if she understood. Lyra responded with a small chirp, nodding slightly. That was all the answer he needed to know they were slowly learning to understand each other. The villagers began their day around him, moving with quiet efficiency. Some worked in the glowing gardens, harvesting strange fruits that glimmered faintly. Others repaired structures made of living plants, bending and shaping them with skill and precision. Ethan walked among them, trying to observe without intruding. He had learned early that showing respect in a foreign culture was just as important as showing courage. Word of his actions the previous day had already spread. Children whispered about the human who had lifted the heavy branch to save Lyra. Adults looked at him with cautious curiosity, unsure of what to make of this strange species. Humans, according to legend, were powerful, clever, and brave, but no one had seen one for generations. Ethan could feel the weight of their attention. He didn't want to appear arrogant. "I just did what anyone would do," he told himself silently. Yet, deep down, he understood that this moment was bigger than him. Soon, a group of villagers approached him. At their head was the alien chief, tall and commanding, with sharp silver eyes and a calm but intense presence. He walked with the grace of someone who had lived many years, observing carefully without unnecessary words. The chief stopped before Ethan and studied him closely. Ethan met his gaze, trying not to look nervous. After a long pause, the chief spoke in a language Ethan could not understand, but one of the villagers handed him a small device. It translated words into sounds Ethan could comprehend. "Human," the chief said slowly, his voice deep and measured. "You acted without fear to save one of our young. That is unusual. Tell me why you did it." Ethan took a deep breath. "I didn't want her to get hurt. I couldn't just leave her there." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly. Ethan could feel the weight of judgment. In Zyphora culture, strength and skill were highly valued. But so was understanding. Acting without thought could sometimes be seen as reckless. But Ethan's honesty seemed to resonate. "You are not like our warriors," the chief said finally. "You rely not only on strength but on something else. Courage? Compassion?" Ethan nodded, unsure if he had used the right words. "I guess both." The chief studied him silently, then gestured toward Lyra. She stepped forward, limping slightly but still alert. "She speaks of your bravery," the chief said. "She calls you a friend." Ethan felt a small smile form. "I'm glad she's okay." The chief made a soft noise, almost like a laugh, but deeper and more resonant. Then he waved Ethan to follow him. They walked through the village, past homes and glowing gardens. Villagers watched silently, some with suspicion, some with awe. Ethan realized that everyone here was measuring him, judging if humans were to be respected or feared. They stopped in front of a building that looked older than the others, its walls covered in living vines that pulsed with soft light. Inside, the air was cool, and the walls were decorated with symbols Ethan did not understand. The chief gestured for him to sit. Lyra sat nearby, watching closely. "You have acted well," the chief said, after a long pause. "But saving one life is not enough to prove your nature. Humans are said to be clever and brave. Yes, but there is more to being honorable than a single act. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand. I want to help, not just once, but whenever I can." The chief's eyes glimmered. "We will see." Over the next few days, Ethan began to learn more about the alien culture. He noticed the way they treated the environment with care, how they communicated without unnecessary noise, and how even children were trained to observe, think, and act responsibly. Everything was different from Earth, yet there was a sense of harmony he admired. Lyra became his guide, showing him how to move carefully through the forest, how to avoid dangerous plants and creatures, and even how to understand simple signs in their language. Ethan taught her a few words in English, and together, they laughed when mispronunciations made strange, funny sounds. One afternoon, while exploring the outskirts of the village, Ethan noticed a group of children staring at him. They whispered and pointed, clearly unsure of what to make of a human being. Ethan smiled at them and gave a small bow, mimicking a gesture Lyra had shown him. Slowly, the children approached, curious rather than afraid. This small interaction did more than Ethan expected. The villagers began to see that he meant no harm. He was not a threat. He was different, yes, but kind and brave. Stories of his bravery began to grow, as humans tended to in legend. But this time, the villagers would experience it for themselves. The chief watched all of this quietly. His thoughts were complex. Humans were often described as strong, clever, and unpredictable. But here was one, young and small, who had saved a life and now was learning their ways with humility and respect. That combination, courage without arrogance, cleverness without cruelty, was rare. One evening, the chief gathered a few trusted advisors and spoke softly. The human boy shows courage unlike any warrior I have known. But courage alone does not make trust. We must test him further. We must see if he can understand our ways and act wisely. Ethan, unaware of this, was sitting near Lyra as the twin moons rose in the sky, casting the forest in silver light. They shared a simple meal of glowing fruits and soft, dough-like alien bread. Ethan listened as Lyra described the village, her words translated through gestures and a small device. "You saved me," she said softly. "The chief, he watches you. He will know soon." Ethan frowned. "Know what?" "That humans are special," she replied, her large eyes serious. "Not just strong, brave, but wise." Ethan smiled. "I hope I can show him that." The next day, the chief summoned Ethan once more. This time, the message was clear. He would face a challenge. The chief did not explain the details, only that Ethan must accompany him and prove that he could act wisely and bravely in a situation the aliens called the trial of courage. Ethan followed Lyra and the chief into the forest. The path led to a canyon filled with strange plants that emitted soft sparks when touched. The air was thick with the scent of alien flowers and minerals. Ethan's heart raced. He had faced wild creatures before, yes, but this was different. He didn't know what would happen, only that he must succeed. To earn the trust of the villagers, the chief stopped at the edge of the canyon. "Here," he said through the translator, "is your first test. A young creature is trapped below. You must save it without harming it or yourself." Ethan looked down into the canyon. There, tangled among sharp rocks and glowing plants, was a small alien animal, its limbs twisted in pain. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He remembered Lyra, remembered the creatures from the first day, and stepped carefully toward the canyon floor. He moved slowly, observing the creature, avoiding the glowing plants that could shock him or the animal. Using a long branch, he gently lifted the creature, talking softly to keep it calm. The chief watched silently, his sharp eyes following every movement. Finally, Ethan lifted the creature safely onto a soft patch of moss. The animal chirped softly and scurried away, unharmed. Ethan looked up, breathing heavily. The chief nodded once. "You have courage," he said, "but you must also show wisdom. Come." The next challenges would test Ethan's problem-solving, teamwork, and understanding of the alien environment. But for now, he had taken the first step. He had shown that humans could act with both bravery and care, a combination that would leave the villagers in awe and begin to shape their opinion of humanity forever. Lyra smiled at him. "You are learning fast," she said. Ethan nodded. "I want to help. Not just now, but always. I want to prove that humans can be something good." The chief's shadow loomed nearby, silent but attentive. He had seen much in his life, but Ethan's actions were unusual. Perhaps humans were not just strong, clever, or dangerous. Perhaps they were something more, something worth understanding, respecting, and maybe even trusting. As the sun set behind the glowing forests of Zyphora, Ethan realized that his adventure had only just begun. The trials ahead would be difficult, the lessons profound, and the bonds he formed could change not only his life, but the lives of the aliens he had begun to call friends. And somewhere in the heart of the village, the chief's eyes gleamed with quiet fascination. He had never met a human before, but now he was beginning to understand that one small boy could leave a mark that might be unforgettable. The sun rose slowly over Zyphora, painting the forest in soft shades of pink and gold. Ethan stretched and took a deep breath of the alien air, still tinged with the scent of glowing flowers and fresh moss. Today was not just another day of exploration. Today, he would face the challenges set by the alien chief, the trial of courage. Lyra appeared beside him, her silver skin shining softly in the morning light. "Are you ready?" she asked, her large eyes filled with both worry and excitement. Ethan nodded. "I think so. I just hope I can do what the chief expects." Lyra smiled faintly. "You will. Humans are strong in ways we do not always see. You act with courage and heart. That is rare." Together, they walked toward the village edge, where the chief and several of his advisors waited. The chief's presence was commanding, his silver eyes watching Ethan with quiet intensity. Without words, he gestured toward a path that led deep into the forest. "This is your first challenge," the translator device said. "You will face obstacles. You will protect lives. You will think, act, and survive." Ethan's heart raced. He was used to facing dangers on Earth, but this forest was alien in every way. The plants seemed alive, the animals moved in ways he had never seen, and the terrain shifted constantly. One wrong step could mean injury, or worse. The path led them to a canyon, wider and more dangerous than the one from the previous day. At the edge, Lyra pointed down. "The creatures you saved yesterday, their nest is below," she explained. "Something is wrong." Looking down, Ethan saw a group of small alien animals trapped among sharp rocks and tangled glowing vines. Their cries were soft but urgent. The canyon walls were steep, and the ground below uneven. Ethan understood immediately this was a test not just of courage, but of careful thinking. He knelt on the edge, examining the vines. They were fragile, but some gave a small shock when touched. He needed a plan. Slowly, he found a long, sturdy branch nearby and tested it. It could support his weight if he leaned carefully. Using it as a support, Ethan lowered himself toward the trapped creatures, moving cautiously. The first creature chirped loudly as he approached. Ethan whispered softly. Holding out his hand, he gently untangled the creature's limbs from the glowing vines. One by one, he freed them, his hands brushing against the sparks that made small noises on contact. He felt a sting once, but he did not panic. Finally, all the creatures were safe. Ethan carried them carefully to a soft moss patch below. The creatures chirped happily, nuzzling him in gratitude before scurrying to safety. Lyra clapped softly, and even the chief nodded from the top of the canyon. "You have courage," the translator repeated the chief's words. "But now comes wisdom." The next challenge appeared immediately. A sudden tremor shook the canyon, dislodging rocks and causing small boulders to roll toward a narrow bridge above a deep chasm. Lyra gasped and held Ethan's hand. "We must cross carefully," she said. Ethan assessed the bridge. It was made of living plant material, thick but flexible. One wrong step, and it could break. The chief and advisors watched silently. Ethan took a deep breath. He remembered what he had learned from observing the villagers. Patience, observation, and respect for the environment. He stepped carefully, testing each section before placing his full weight. Lyra followed, holding his hand for balance. A boulder tumbled close, but Ethan ducked just in time. With slow, Careful movements. They crossed safely. Once on the other side, the chief's translator device spoke again. You act with courage, yet you do not rush. That is wise. But your final challenge requires teamwork and ingenuity. Ahead, a large alien creature blocked their path. It was larger than any predator Ethan had seen, with multiple limbs, glowing eyes, and a sharp, spiked tail. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered in the sunlight. It hissed and bared its teeth. Ethan froze for a moment. This was different from lifting branches or untangling vines. He had no weapon, no special armor. Just his mind and his courage. He looked at Lyra. She was trembling slightly, but she trusted him. He had to trust himself. Stay calm, he whispered to her. We can do this. He observed the creature carefully. It seemed agitated but not immediately aggressive. Its eyes followed their movement, and its tail flicked nervously. Ethan realized it reacted to sudden motion and noise. If they stayed calm and moved slowly, they might pass safely. He picked up a long stick and gently tapped it on the ground far from them, creating a distraction. The creature turned toward the noise. Slowly, Ethan and Lyra tiptoed past, keeping low and moving with deliberate care. Every step was tense, but they succeeded. Once past, Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. The chief's voice came through the translator. You are clever. You understand the world around you. You are brave, yet careful. That is rare. Ethan felt a surge of pride, but he knew the trials were not over. The chief led them further into the forest, where they came upon a large, clear lake. In the center, a small floating island held another creature, trapped by thick vines. The water was deep, and the current strong. Lyra looked nervous. Ethan nodded to her. We can do this together. He studied the situation. He could swim, yes, but he also needed to think creatively. Spotting a large piece of fallen tree near the shore, he used it as a raft. He and Lyra pushed the raft carefully into the current and guided it toward the floating island. Once close, Ethan reached onto the island and untangled the vines around the trapped creature. Lyra helped guide it onto the raft. Slowly, they paddled back to the shore. The creature safe and unharmed. The chief finally spoke. His voice calm but filled with approval. You act with courage, wisdom, and ingenuity. You care for life. Not only for yourself or your friends, but for all creatures. That is unusual. Humans are remarkable. Ethan blinked. He had risked falling, getting hurt, and facing creatures he did not understand. And yet, the chief's words made every moment worth it. He had proven himself not by fighting, but by thinking, acting, and caring. Lyra hugged him briefly, her eyes shining. You are special, she said. You help without expecting anything. That is rare among all species. The chief stepped closer. You have earned respect, human, not only from me but from our people. But remember, courage is not only about facing danger, it is about knowing what is right, even when it is hard. You have shown this today. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. He had always wanted to be brave, but bravery had always seemed like something distant, like stories from Earth. Now he understood that courage could be quiet, it could be careful, and it could make a difference. Over the next hours, the villagers came to see Ethan differently. Children ran to him, eager to learn, while adults nodded respectfully. Even those who had doubted him before now spoke in quiet admiration. He had not only passed the chief's tests, but had also begun to bridge the gap between humans and aliens. That night, Ethan sat with Lyra under the twin moons of Zyphora. The forest glowed around them, peaceful now, and the animals he had saved earlier chirped softly in the distance. Do you think the chief will fully trust me now? Ethan asked. Lyra smiled. He respects you. That is the first step. Trust will come, but it will take time. You must continue to act with courage and wisdom. Ethan nodded. I will. I want to help your people, not just today, but whenever I can. Lyra reached out and held his hand. Then you are already different from most humans we have heard about. You act with heart. Ethan looked up at the glowing sky. He had faced danger, solved problems, and protected life. He had learned more in these 2 days than he ever imagined, and he knew that even greater challenges awaited. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. He had begun to show the aliens that humans could be more than strong or clever. They could be brave, compassionate, and wise. And somewhere deep in the village, the chief watched silently. He had seen humans in legend, but now he had seen one in person, a small boy, with no weapons, no armor, and yet a courage and wisdom that few aliens possessed. That boy, Ethan, had changed the way the chief thought about humans forever. As the forest shimmered under the light of Zyphora's moons, Ethan felt ready. The trials had tested him, but they had also taught him. And tomorrow, he would face the next challenge, the one that could finally earn the full respect of the chief and the village. He did not yet know what it would be, but he was no longer afraid. Courage, he realized, was not just about surviving danger. It was about helping, thinking, and acting in ways that made a difference. And with Lyra by his side, he felt ready for anything. The forest whispered around them, the soft sounds of the night, a reminder that life, alien or human, was precious. And Ethan, a human boy far from Earth, had begun to prove that bravery and heart could shine across the stars. The dawn on Zyphora broke softly, painting the alien forest in hues of gold and violet. Ethan awoke with a sense of excitement and purpose. Today was different. He could feel it. The chief had spoken of a final challenge yesterday, and although he did not know the details, he understood that this test would determine the future of his place in the village. Lyra was already waiting for him. Her silver skin shimmered in the morning light, and her large eyes reflected determination. "Are you ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I am. I've learned a lot, and I will do my best." The chief and several advisors were waiting at the edge of the village. The chief's gaze met Ethan's, calm yet intense. There were no words exchanged at first. Instead, the chief gestured for Ethan and Lyra to follow him through the glowing forest toward a vast valley that lay beyond the mountains. As they walked, the translator device whispered the chief's words. "This is your final test. The village and its creatures are in danger. You must lead, protect, and make decisions that save lives." "Do you understand?" Ethan swallowed. He had faced creatures, puzzles, and dangers before. But this sounded different. This was about leadership, not just bravery or cleverness. "I understand," he said firmly. "I will do everything I can." The valley spread out before them, beautiful and wild. But the scene was alarming. A massive storm had formed unexpectedly. With swirling winds and flashes of light, lightning struck the distant trees, and the glowing river nearby was swelling with dangerous speed. The villagers had already begun evacuating, guided by the chief's advisors, but there were still many creatures and a few villagers trapped closer to the forest edge. The chief spoke quietly. "The creatures, the villagers, all depend on you now. Act wisely, act bravely, and act quickly. We watch." Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He could do this. He had to. He glanced at Lyra. She nodded, trusting him completely. That trust alone gave him strength. He sprinted toward the trapped villagers, guiding them away from the rising water. His mind raced as he thought of solutions. He noticed a fallen tree that could form a makeshift bridge across a narrow part of the swollen river. With the villagers' help, he positioned it carefully, creating a safe path for them to cross. Next, he turned to the creatures. Some small alien animals were caught in mud near the riverbank, panicking as the water surged closer. Ethan used his knowledge from previous trials. He grabbed vines, twisting and tying them into loops, creating nets to gently lift the creatures to safety. Lyra helped, carrying the small animals and comforting them as Ethan worked. A sudden roar made them both pause. One of the larger creatures, trapped on a ridge, was panicking. Its glowing eyes darted around as lightning struck nearby. Ethan knew it could injure itself or others if it panicked further. He remembered how the chief had once emphasized calm and understanding. Slowly, Ethan approached the creature, speaking softly. Though it did not understand his words, it sensed his calm energy. Step by step, he guided the creature onto a safe path, using branches as support and the vines he had braided as a safety line. Lyra stayed close, encouraging the creature with gentle gestures. Finally, the creature reached safety, and a low, grateful sound rumbled from its throat. Ethan felt a wave of relief, but the storm was relentless. Trees were beginning to fall, the river's current grew stronger, and distant thunder warned of danger yet to come. Ethan realized he needed a plan to move the remaining villagers to higher ground quickly. He spotted a natural ridge leading to a plateau. The climb was steep, but it was the safest option. Ethan called out to the villagers, guiding them toward the path. Some struggled, frightened by the storm, but his calm voice reassured them. Lyra ran beside the children, holding their hands. Together, they climbed, carefully navigating slippery rocks and loose soil. Halfway up, a large branch fell, blocking the path. Ethan acted quickly. Using a combination of strength and clever thinking, he leveraged smaller rocks to lift the branch enough for the villagers to pass. Each person crossed safely, following his instructions. When the last villager made it to higher ground, Ethan noticed Lyra was missing. Panic surged through him. He scanned the lower valley and saw her struggling against the wind near a small cliff, trying to protect a group of frightened creatures. Without thinking, Ethan dashed back into the storm. Lightning cracked across the sky, thunder shaking the ground, but Ethan focused. He reached Lyra, just as a small creature slipped toward the cliff's edge. With quick hands, he grabbed both the creature and Lyra, pulling them to safety. Lyra gasped, hugging him tightly. "You saved us," she whispered, eyes wide with awe. Ethan shook his head. "We saved each other." Finally, the storm began to ease, the winds slowing and the lightning retreating. The villagers, now safely on the plateau, watched Ethan and Lyra from above. Their cheers of relief and admiration echoed through the valley. The chief emerged from the trees, walking slowly toward Ethan. His expression was unreadable, yet his eyes gleamed with something profound. When he reached Ethan, he spoke through the translator. "You have acted bravely, wisely, and with a heart that cares for all life. Not just for yourself, not just for your friends, but for all who needed you. That is extraordinary." Ethan felt a rush of pride, but he stayed humble. "I just did what I could," he said softly. The chief nodded slowly. "What you have done today will be remembered forever. Humans are rare, yes. But you have shown that even one human can change the hearts and minds of an entire village." He gestured to the villagers below. "Your courage has earned not only respect, but trust. From this day, you are an honored friend of Zyphora." The villagers cheered, rushing to greet Ethan and Lyra. Children climbed onto his shoulders, adults bowed respectfully, and even the creatures he had saved approached, chirping and nuzzling him. Ethan smiled, overwhelmed by the warmth and acceptance. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes shining. "The chief. He respects you. And so do we all. You are part of our village now." Ethan felt a deep sense of happiness. He had come to Zyphora as a visitor, a curious human boy seeking adventure. But he had proven something more. He had shown that humans were capable of courage, compassion, and wisdom, a combination that could bridge worlds. The chief approached one last time, placing a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder. "Remember this, human. Bravery is not only in facing danger. It is in caring, thinking, and acting when it matters most. Today, you have shown all these things. You are unforgettable." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight and honor of the words. He understood now that being human was not just about strength or intelligence. It was about heart. And that heart had made a difference on Zyphora. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ethan looked around at the villagers celebrating, the glowing forest, and the creatures that now trusted him. Lyra sat beside him, smiling. "Do you think humans will ever visit again?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "Maybe, but for now, I will remember Zyphora and all of you forever." The chief watched from a distance, quietly proud. He had seen legends of humans, heard stories passed through generations. But now, he had seen one in person. A small boy, unarmed and alone, had faced danger, shown ingenuity, and cared for life with a pure heart. That human had changed everything, and in that moment, the chief made a decision that would echo for generations. Humans were no longer just creatures of stories, they were allies, friends, and beings capable of inspiring hope and courage across the stars. Ethan knew he would leave Zyphora eventually. His mission would continue, and Earth awaited. But he also knew that the bonds he had formed, the trust he had earned, and the lives he had touched would last far longer than any journey home. As night fell, the forest shimmered with bioluminescent light, creatures chirping softly, and the villagers resting safely. Ethan sat quietly with Lyra, feeling a sense of peace he had never known. In the distance, the chief's eyes glimmered one last time. The human boy had proven himself unforgettable, not because of strength, not because of cleverness, but because of courage, compassion, and heart. And somewhere, deep in the stars, humanity had left a mark that would be remembered on Zyphora forever. Ethan smiled, knowing that this adventure was only one of many. But today, he had learned the greatest lesson of all. Being human could inspire worlds. The forest whispered softly in the night, carrying the story of a small boy, a brave heart, and an unforgettable moment that bridged the gap between species, cultures, and worlds. Ethan had arrived as a visitor, but he would leave as a hero, and the alien chief would never forget him.